My wife abandoned me and our daughter and took $15,000 from our savings. 2 months later, she came back, begging to stay at my house because she got scammed. I'm 34 years old. I work as a project manager at a construction company, and what happened 6 months ago literally tore me in half, but it also made me realize a lot of things that I probably should have seen coming for years. I guess I should start from the beginning, or at least from the day everything went to hell, because that day changed my life and my daughter's life in a way I never imagined possible. It was a regular Tuesday. I remember perfectly it was Tuesday, because on Tuesdays I always came home early to have dinner with Elizabeth and Grace. My daughter was 5 years old at that time. Well, she had just turned 5 like 2 weeks before, and she was the most important thing in my life, you know? One of those things you say, but really feel in your chest every time you see her. Elizabeth and I had been married for 7 years. We'd been together since college. I mean, she was 32 years old, and I thought I knew her better than anyone in the world, but it turns out I had no idea who she really was. I got home that Tuesday around 6 in the evening, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Like that weird silence you feel when something's wrong, but you don't know exactly what. The house was too quiet. Grace would normally be watching TV or playing in the living room, making noise like 5-year-olds do. But there was nothing. I walked into the kitchen, and there it was, a note folded on the table, and my stomach knotted up before I even read it because something in me already knew this was going to be bad. Really bad. The note said, "I need time for myself. To find myself. I can't go on like this. Grace is with your mom. I'm sorry." That was it. 4 lines on a piece of paper torn from the notepad where we normally made the grocery list, and my wife of 7 years, the mother of my daughter, had left with no more explanation than that. I stood there reading those lines over and over. Like more text was going to appear if I kept looking. But no. That was all I had. I called my mom immediately, and yeah, Grace was there. Elizabeth had dropped her off around 2 in the afternoon, saying she had an emergency and would be back soon. But my mom was already worried because 4 hours had passed and Elizabeth wasn't answering her phone. I went to get Grace, trying to stay calm, told her mommy had to take a last-minute work trip, and she asked me when mommy was coming back, and I didn't know what to tell her because honestly I had no idea. The first few days were total chaos. I tried calling Elizabeth like 1,000 times, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I texted her, sent her emails. Nothing. It was like she had evaporated. I asked Victoria, her best friend from college, if she knew anything, and she was as confused as I was. It told me Elizabeth hadn't mentioned anything to her, that everything seemed normal the last time they talked. I called her sister, her parents who live in another state. Nobody knew anything. Or at least, that's what they said. About a week after she left, I needed to check the bank accounts because, I had to figure out how I was going to handle everything alone now. The house expenses, Grace's daycare, all of that. And that's when I found the first real sign that this wasn't just a moment of existential crisis, or whatever her note said. Elizabeth had withdrawn $15,000 from our savings account, almost everything we had saved, 2 days before she left. She hadn't told me anything. She just went to the bank and took the money, and I sat there looking at the statement thinking, really? Is this actually happening? But wait, because it gets worse, much worse. Like 2 weeks after she left, my brother Matthew called me and said, "Daniel, you need to see this," and he sent me a screenshot of Elizabeth's Instagram. I had stopped checking her social media because it made me feel worse, but Matthew had seen it and thought I should know. It was a photo of Elizabeth at the Falamian beach, in a new bikini I'd never seen, smiling at the camera with a caption that said, "Finally feeling free," with sun and wave emojis and all that shit. Finally feeling free. As if our life together, as if Grace had been a prison she'd just escaped from. That's when something changed in me. I went from being devastated and confused to being genuinely furious. Because it's one thing if you need time or space or whatever, but it's a whole different thing to abandon your 5-year-old daughter and then post beach photos like you're on vacation without a care in the world. Grace was asking me every day where mommy was, when she was coming back, and I had to make up excuses while her mother was out there feeling free and having a good time. It was Matthew who suggested I check her email. He's a lawyer, and he told me that if we were going down the divorce route, I needed to know exactly what we were dealing with. I had her email password because we'd always shared that kind of thing. Like, we'd never had secrets or so I thought. And when I logged in, I found something that literally made me feel like I'd been hit in the stomach with a baseball bat. Notifications from Tinder, from Bumble, from I don't know how many other dating apps. Verification messages, match notifications, messages from guys. Some of those emails were from months ago, from when we were still living together, from when I'd come home and we'd have dinner like a normal family, and I'd ask her how her day was and she'd tell me about her work at the marketing agency, like everything was normal. I sat there at the computer until 3 in the morning, reading conversations, seeing photos she'd shared with these guys, messages where she talked about how unhappy she was, how bored she was with her life, how she needed something exciting, something new. There was a shared photo album on Google Photos that she'd created with one of these guys, and when I opened it, I realized I'd been seeing each other regularly. There were photos of them at restaurants I recognized because they were in our city, photos in parks, at the movies, and in all of them she looked happy, smiling, like I'd never seen her with me in recent years. And you know what hurt the most? That in some of those photos, she was wearing the necklace I'd given her on our anniversary. Literally, she was wearing my gift while going out with another guy. I don't know how I made it to the next day. I don't think I slept at all. I just sat there processing all this information, trying to understand when exactly my marriage had become this giant lie. Grace woke up at 7, like always, came into my room and asked if she could watch cartoons, and I had to act like everything was fine. Make her breakfast, take her to daycare, go to work, do all the normal things while my world was falling apart inside. Matthew convinced me to go see a lawyer. He told me I needed to protect myself and protect Grace. That Elizabeth clearly wasn't thinking about us at all. I went to see a lawyer he recommended, a woman in her 50s named Patricia, who explained the whole divorce process to me. Custody, division of assets, all that. She told me that the fact that Elizabeth had abandoned Grace was going to weigh heavily in my favor for custody, and that I needed to document everything. Save all the messages, all the emails, all the evidence of her infidelity and abandonment. Like 2 months passed without hearing anything from Elizabeth. 2 months in which I basically became a full-time single dad while working and trying to keep everything together. My parents helped me so much. My mom would pick up Grace from daycare on days I had to stay late at work. My dad would come on weekends to help me with house stuff I didn't know how to do. Basically, my family came together to support me while Elizabeth was out there living her best life or whatever. And then, Thanksgiving came. My parents had insisted that Grace and I spend the day with them. They said we needed to be with family and that we shouldn't be alone at home. We arrived around 2 in the afternoon. Grace was excited because she was going to see her grandparents and cousins, and I was trying to maintain a positive attitude for her, even though inside I felt like garbage because this was our first Thanksgiving without Elizabeth, or well, technically she was absent by her own choice, but it still hurt. We were all in the living room. My parents, Matthew with his wife, my sister with her kids, everyone talking and trying to make the day normal. When the doorbell rang, my mom went to open it and I heard a voice that made me freeze completely. It was Elizabeth, standing there at my parents' door like nothing, with a smile asking if she could come in. I can't even describe what I felt in that moment. It was like a mix of shock, fury, confusion, all at the same time. Grace ran towards her yelling, "Mommy! Mommy!" And Elizabeth hugged her, like she was Mother of the Year, like she hadn't abandoned her 2 months ago without any explanation. My mom looked at me not knowing what to do, and honestly, I didn't know what to do either. Like I wasn't going to make a scene in front of Grace and ruin her Thanksgiving. But at the same time, I wanted to yell at Elizabeth to get out, that she had no right to show up like that out of nowhere. Elizabeth acted like everything was completely normal during the whole dinner, chatted with my family, served Grace food, laughed at my dad's jokes, and I just sat there basically in shock trying to process what the hell was happening. After dinner, when Grace was playing with her cousins, I tried to talk to Elizabeth privately. I asked her what she was doing there, where she'd been, why she hadn't answered any of my calls or messages, and she just said, "I needed time, Daniel. I already explained it to you in the note." as if that was enough explanation for abandoning your family for 2 months. I asked her about the money, about the beach photos, about everything, and she got defensive immediately, told me she had a right to that money too, that it was our joint account, that she needed that money to start over, that I didn't understand what she was going through. And then, and this is what pissed me off the most, she said, besides, you kept the house in Grace, so don't complain. As if Grace were a piece of furniture to be divided in a divorce, as if our daughter were something I'd kept instead of someone she'd abandoned. I tried to stay calm, told her we needed to talk seriously about all this, about the future, about Grace, about the divorce, but she just said, I'm not ready for that conversation yet. I have to go, and she left. Just like that, she said goodbye to Grace with a kiss and promised she'd see her soon, and then she left in an Uber, leaving me there with a bunch of unanswered questions and a daughter who was confused about why Mommy had left again so quickly. Like, 3 more weeks passed without any contact, and I was already in full mode of moving forward with the divorce. My lawyer had all the papers ready to file, and I was basically mentally prepared to close this chapter of my life, as painful as it was. And then, on a random Wednesday night around 9, I got a message from Elizabeth asking if we could meet, that she needed to talk to me, that it was important. Part of me didn't want to see her. I wanted to just send her the divorce papers by mail and be done with all this without having to face her again, but another part of me, the part that had been married to her for 7 years, felt like I owed her at least to hear what she had to say. You know what I mean? So we agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my work the next day, a public place where I knew she wouldn't be able to make a dramatic scene. I arrived first and sat at a table in the back, ordered a coffee I knew I wasn't going to drink because my stomach was in knots, and waited. Elizabeth arrived like 10 minutes late. She looked different, like thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. She didn't look like the happy and free woman from the Instagram photos. She sat across from me without ordering anything to drink, and for a moment neither of us said anything. We just sat there looking at each other. Finally, she started talking, and what she told me basically left me speechless. Turns out one of the guys she'd been dating, one of the guys from the dating apps, had scammed her, had taken money from her with some made-up story about an investment or an emergency or something like that. I didn't understand all the details because, honestly, I was struggling to process what I was hearing. Part of the $15,000 she'd taken from our account, she'd given to this guy, and now he'd disappeared, blocked her from everything, and she was basically on the street because she'd spent the rest of the money renting an apartment she couldn't afford anymore. I sat there, listening to her cry and explain this whole situation to me, and I didn't know whether to feel pity, fury, or just nothing. She was telling me all this like she was a victim, like things had happened to her, without ever mentioning what she'd done to Grace and me, without apologizing for abandoning us, without showing even a little bit of remorse for destroying our lives while she was out there doing whatever she wanted. And then came the part I knew was coming but was still surprised. She had the nerve to ask. Elizabeth looked at me with those teary eyes and said, "Daniel, I know I have no right to ask you this, but I need a place to stay just temporarily while I recover from all this. Just until I get a stable job and can rent something. I promise it won't be long." And that way Grace could see me more often too. There it was. The real reason for this meeting. It wasn't to apologize. It wasn't to talk about Grace or about our marriage. It was because she needed something from me, because her plans had gone wrong and now she needed me to rescue her. And the thing is that for a second, just for a second, I considered saying yes, because after 7 years together, after everything we'd built, part of me still felt that obligation to take care of her, to help her, as stupid as that sounds. But then I thought about Grace, about how she'd been asking for her mom every day for 2 months, about how I'd had to explain to her that Mommy was busy and would be back soon, when I myself had no idea if that was true, about how I'd had to be mom and dad at the same time while Elizabeth was out there living her life without worries. I thought about the nights Grace would wake up crying, asking why Mommy had left, about how I had to comfort her without having real answers to give her. I thought about all the messages I'd found in Elizabeth's email, the photos with other guys, the money she'd taken from our account, how she'd shown up on Thanksgiving acting like nothing to then. I leave again without explanation, how she'd never, not once in all these months, asked me how Grace and I were, if we were okay, if we needed anything. And then something in me just clicked, you know? Like when you reach that point where you realize you can't anymore, that you don't want to anymore. I got up from the table, pulled an envelope from my backpack with the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared, put it on the table in front of Elizabeth, and told her, "No, Elizabeth, you're not coming back to our house. You're not going to come in and out of Grace's life when it's convenient for you. I'm not going to be your plan B when your other plans don't work out. And the only thing you're going to do is sign these papers, and we're going to establish supervised visitation for Grace if you're actually interested in seeing her. And that's it." She started to protest, to say I was being cruel, that I didn't understand what she'd been through, that she needed my help, but I just turned around and left. I walked to my car, and for the first time in months, I felt something like relief, like that weight on my chest I'd been carrying since the day I found that note in the kitchen got a little bit lighter. It's been like 2 months since that day at the coffee shop. Elizabeth signed the divorce papers after my lawyer pressured her legally. We established supervised visits on Sundays at my parents' house, where Grace can see her for 2 hours, and Elizabeth has come to like 3 of those visits so far. The others, she's canceled, with last-minute excuses that basically confirm everything I already knew about her. Grace is better now. She stopped asking about her mom every day. She's happier, more stable. She knows Mommy loves her but lives somewhere else now. And honestly, I think she's better off this way than living in that constant tension of not knowing when Elizabeth was going to decide she needed time for herself again. My parents keep helping me a lot. Matthew and I see each other more often now. Basically, my family became my complete support system, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not going to lie and say everything's perfect now. There are difficult days. Days where Grace asks why they can't live together like other families. Days where I feel overwhelmed trying to be enough for her when I know she needs her mom too. But there are also good days. Days where Grace hugs me and tells me she loves me. Days where we laugh together watching movies on the couch. Days where I feel like we're okay, that we're going to be okay. Last week, Grace asked me if Mommy was going to come back someday, not to visit her on Sundays but to live with us again. I told her the truth, that I didn't know, that Mommy was trying to work through some things in her life and that for now the two of us were making a good team. Didn't she think so? She thought about it for a moment, nodded her head, and then asked me if we could make pancakes for dinner. And that's when I realized she's okay, or at least she's going to be, because she has love, she has stability, she has a home, and that's enough for now, I guess.